The reality is emotional health is biological. It is medicine. Lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Because joy is a capacity. It's not an absence of pain. Unprocessed emotions equals energy leaks. Words, when we feel our energy is leaking, that's how we get burnt out really fast. Welcome to the Emotional Longevity Podcast. My name is Dr. Elisha Goldstein. Okay, let's start here. This is the Surgeon General's recent report called The Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, I'm just showing a slide here that says lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. So if emotional disconnection can shorten our lives, what happens when we strengthen emotional health? That's what we're exploring today, 10 hidden truths about emotional longevity that most people miss. So these are truths that bridge science, psychology, and also the small, real changes that add up. I call them tiny shifts that can make a lifetime of difference. And by the way, today is also the day we're jumpstarting a movement for emotional health with the Tiny Shifts private presale. That's running through November 8th. There's a link in the description. I'll talk more about that. You can get access to a signed copy of the book and also access to deeper experiences to bring more emotional longevity to people that actually really need it right now. I'll share more about that later in the episode. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, let's start with the first hidden truth. A lot of people think that emotional health is like a secondary soft science thing, and medicine and all of that is like really the first thing that matters. Well, the reality is emotional health is biological. It is medicine. So if you look at this study right here, you're going to see that suppressing our emotions is associated with inflammation of the body. So when we get wounded physically, our body creates inflammation. And we see a lot of inflammation also with autoimmune disorders and a lot of unnecessary inflammation in our body by the way we eat, maybe other things that we do. But we also see that suppressing our emotions is associated with inflammation. So we tend to think of emotions as something that's just mental, but they're actually biological events. And chronic suppression of that has the same markers that we see with aging and disease. So emotional awareness, you can think of it as cellular protection. That's really important to take home. Because when you think about that, all the moments in our day where we're having a stressful moment with our kids or over taking care of aging parents or maybe at work, and we don't take time to release that, or we don't take time to take care of ourselves, we're not protecting the cells of our body. And the tiny shift you can make there, and in the spirit of that type of term, is the next time you feel tension, see if you can be aware of where it is in your body and just pause and name it. Really, that moment of honesty might be the most powerful health practice you can do today. So just take that in for a second. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Okay, for this next hidden truth, I'm switching over to the beginning of a YouTube video for you to listen. This is from the Cleveland Clinic. And this hidden truth is about how the nervous system learns faster than the mind. It's there and giving us signals and information before we're mentally even aware. So this is about the vagus nerve. Listen in for a minute.
The phrase, getting on my nerves, isn't usually a positive one. But what if we told you that strengthening one specific nerve could improve your stress levels and boost your mental health? It's called vagus nerve stimulation, and it targets the nerve that runs from your brain to your large intestine.
Okay. So if you're seeing this right now, you're seeing where the vagus nerve is. It's the 10th cranial nerve that connects our brain to our heart. And you can think of it as kind of like a wandering superhighway that just kind of like connects all of these different areas, heart, lungs, gut. And before your mind even decides, before we're even consciously aware whether we're safe or not in a particular situation, your body already knows. Or it's sending signals that you're not safe even when you are. That's also happening. So when the vagus nerve is underactive, we tend to feel anxious. So we're more on high alert. Our heart rate goes up, our breathing goes down, our digestion gets tight. We can think of it as kind of aligned in some ways with that fight-flight response. But when it's activated, And we can do this through a long exhale. We can do this through humming. We can do this through splashing cool water on our face. It sends the signal that, okay, we're safe now. Our body starts to cool down a bit. And that's why emotion regulation starts from the bottom up. And that you see directly there, the connection between emotional health, which is the way we're relating to how we're feeling, the internal signals, how we're feeling emotionally, the thoughts we're having, how we're feeling physically. And so the nervous system learns this idea of safety before the mind really understands it. And so our job is to integrate the two. So the tiny shift you can do here is the next time you're feeling overwhelmed, don't do what a lot of us try to do, think our way out of it. I always tell people that if you're really anxious, would you go to someone having a panic attack for advice? No, but we oftentimes go to our mind to try and solve things and fix them, and that doesn't really work. So instead, see if you can recognize, this is the tiny shift, recognize this feeling of overwhelm that's there, and see if you can take a moment and lower your shoulders for a second and just breathe it out. Maybe take a longer exhale. One slow 6-second exhale can activate the vagus nerve and tell your body everything it needs to know to feel more grounded. These are just kind of tiny shifts. Doesn't solve everything in the moment, but what happens is when we do this, these small things with repetition over time, that around our emotional health, our brain begins to memorize it. And that's when tiny shifts start to create bigger changes. It can create it in the moment too. It's dramatic sometimes a shift can make, a small thing. But what we're trying to do is also weave it over time so our brain memorizes it and it starts to come more automatically. Okay, let's go to the third insight now. I wanted to show this article from Glassdoor. For those of you, again, listening on Apple and Spotify, I'm just showing an article here. I'll leave the links to all the articles and the descriptions below too. It talks about how burnout is on the rise. If you look at the date here, April 29, 2025, very recent. What we're seeing here is a graph where you're seeing over time from 2016 to 2025, and you're seeing a large spike in burnout. I just gave a presentation to over 100 employees, 100 executives and entrepreneurs, showing them something similar to this because a lot of them are feeling it. And people came to me during the presentation and they were talking about the deep grief they were feeling in their lives. They were talking about feeling overwhelmed with taking care of their kids and all the things that they had to do. Tears were coming down. People are feeling it. This is real. And so what we want to understand here is that unprocessed emotions equals energy leaks. And so in other words, when we feel when our energy is leaking, that's how we get burnt out really fast. Every unacknowledged emotion, which happens all the time in our lives, we learn to shut down our emotions. We learned it from the time we were kids. We certainly learn it in our relationships. We train each other over time about what emotions are okay and what's not okay. Sometimes you have room for your emotions in your relationship. Sometimes there's no room for your emotion. And as you're not acknowledging this and processing it, energy is just starting to kind of leak out and start to drain your battery. So learning how to process our emotions, learning how to let them flow isn't just an indulgence. It's maintenance. And one thing that you can do today that's very simple, that's around this particular topic, is just asking yourself and being aware of where your body is bracing in the day. And then asking yourself, once you recognize that, you're going to be in a little bit more of a space between stimulus and response, a space of awareness. In that space, there's more choice and perspective. So you can then ask yourself a question. And when you ask yourself a question, the brain looks for answers. You'll see, I call this accessing our natural intelligence. And you can ask yourself, what am I bracing against? And then give yourself permission to soften around it. Okay, let's go to insight number 4. This one is about how a lot of us miss out on the opportunities for and benefits of joy in our lives. And we have this negativity bias. You've heard about it before and you've experienced it in your own life. I was talking with someone the other day and we were talking about how our memories as kids. And he said, do you have any we were talking about sports, and he said, do you have any memories of like making that great shot? I used to play basketball, or I still kind of do a little bit, but as a kid. And I said, no, but I certainly remember when I lost the game for us. And so, and so there it was, that negativity bias in full bloom. But when we go on the lookout, we can be feeling grief, anxiety, or anger. And at the same time, sometimes our brain can overemphasize it. And sometimes the question is there something else to hear right now? Is there a way to hold both? Not to put on rose-colored glasses, but to ask ourselves, like, where's the today? What's something I'm appreciative of today? Where's the beauty outside or inside today? Can I be on the lookout for these moments? Because joy is a capacity. It's not an absence of pain. And so when we go on the lookout for these types of moments in our lives, the beauty, the appreciation, the gratitude, it's not to negate or minimize the pain that's there, the uncomfortable emotion that's there. It's to say, can I hold both? Can joy sit beside this too? That's the question we can ask. So after we recognize and release the loop that might be there, we can ask ourselves the question, can joy sit beside this too? And see if a yes maybe arises. Yeah, I can hold both. And then see what happens in your body. So that's how we know that emotional health is also not just a mental thing, right? It's also physical, because you'll likely notice, or at least in some moments, you'll notice your body begin to shift. And that's how emotional flexibility becomes emotional strength. Okay, let's go to insight number 5. Okay, I want to pop this on screen again. This is from the World Health Organization. For those who are listening, it's an article that talks about how social connection is linked to improved health and reduced risk of early death. So what we want to take away from this is that relationships actually regulate our biology. They influence the physical aspects of our health span, which means living well longer in life, being more functional, living well longer, and our longevity, which means living longer. So this one gets me every time, because this is at the epicenter of my life, what I, in my better moments, what I like to focus on. And it also harkens back to what we said earlier around isolation and loneliness. The WHO lists isolation right alongside smoking, like we talked about earlier, and also around poor diet as risks for disease. When you feel seen or loved, you activate that vagus nerve, like we talked about before. It turns on and it shifts the body back into repair from feeling defensive or going into high alert. And that's why connection heals faster than any willpower or any kind of hustle culture that we feed into on our social media. And something that you could do right now that, again, is just like a tiny shift, is you could take a moment. You could pause this if you want to. And I even recommend doing this. Pause this for a moment. Do this right now. Text someone right now. No agenda. Just a moment of appreciation for how they show up in your life or something about them. The health impact of that, emotionally, you'll feel it. Physically, you might feel it in your body too. If you're noticing that, then you can make the connection between that and your biology. Hey, taking a quick break to let you know, I've got a new book coming out called Tiny Shifts. It's about how small, intentional shifts in your emotional health can transform your stress, relationships, and even your longevity. When you join the early access list, you're going to get a free sneak peek of the Tiny Shifts mini guide and weekly insights into the top tools and trends in emotional health. Just head to drelishagoldstein.com/tiny-shifts-early. If you can't remember that, the link is also in the show notes below. Now let's get back to the episode. Okay, here's insight number 6. Awareness rewires faster than any effort that you're giving, let's say, even any active task. And when you can think of the brain as having 2 gears. One is a gear that lights up when we're just resting or our mind's wandering or anything like that. And it has a really wonderful purpose for it, which is it comes up with creative ideas a lot of the time. It can come up with different plans and rehearsals. It can help us prepare for things. But when we start to feel overstressed or anxious, that's when it kicks that gift into gear around catastrophizing or all the worst case scenarios that could happen, and really kind of gets us stuck into states of rumination and worrying, things like that. And then there's another gear that happens, let's say in this case in meditation, where what's happening is we're reducing that activity in that part of the brain and enhancing the part that lights up when we're more present and aware. So what we see here is it's like justice scales, that if we can strengthen the ability to be more present and aware, we can reduce the activity in the part of the brain more than engaging in some other task that could be involved with catastrophizing, worrying, and in the inner unhealthy states. So if you're someone who struggles with anxiety and depression, and it also impacts you physically, this is where this might come in handy for you, where you understand that, like for me, as an example, for insomnia, I used to struggle deeply with insomnia. And understanding this made a huge impact on me, because what I knew was I had to shift the justice scales. Even though my brain was telling me, that default mode was telling me that, nope, focusing on being present on my body wasn't going to work. I need to toss and turn and do different things. And this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Kept telling me that. I knew that if I allowed myself to just be present to, let's say, the sensation in my toe and bring myself back, I had to have faith, because my brain was so convincing that this wasn't going to work, and it kept bucking me off many times. But understanding this, that meditation leads to reduced default mode network activity, helped eventually reduce the rumination that was there and the worry that was there. And with repetition led to me trusting myself more. So that's the value of this one. And you can imagine it when it comes to any kind of behaviors you want to enhance in your life that are around health. Oh, I can't exercise this much. Oh, I can't get to sleep that was my issue. Or I can't ever get a good balanced nutritional diet together. And if you find yourself also in states of worrying and rumination, that's creating inflammation in your body, this is something that can be really powerful. With that said, meditation is not a one size fits all for everyone. That's why I like to think about it in terms of tiny shifts sometimes. And what I mean by that is just see if you can notice what's here. Just simply the fact, as I said earlier, just of naming what's here, naming how I'm feeling physically, naming what's present emotionally for me, naming what's the thoughts that are on my mind, or writing them down in a journal, can be more powerful than the move to try and fix and problem solve it in that moment. So again, awareness rewires faster than getting involved in a task and giving effort into it, which again speaks the opposite of the hustle culture that's out there. Okay, let's move to insight number 7. If you've heard me talk before, you've heard me talk about emotional loops. These are survival codes for us. These are things we learned that are transgenerational from our families before, around, again, maybe survival. I think about Holocaust survivors and their kids or people that have trauma from their families, intergenerational trauma or transgenerational trauma that comes down, and all of a sudden they find themselves a little bit more neurotic or a little bit more anxious, but the trauma didn't happen to them. And so we can get it like that. We can get it from our families growing up. And so the loops we get stuck in, these emotional loops about worry, control, avoidance, were once protection for us. I have a client from years ago who every time her parents get into big fights, she would start getting anxious about it and go into her room, and her behavior was to down a bag of potato chips. Well, later in life, she continued to do that. It was protection for her. It was soothing for her, but later in life, it really didn't work for her so much. So the problem with these loops that we experience is our brain doesn't really know when the danger's over. It carries it over into later years. And so when you're able to name it, again, that awareness piece, drawing from insight number 6, this is my control loop, you begin to separate your identity from the pattern that's there. And that's the power in that. So now reactivity, what was once reactivity, by becoming aware of it, by becoming aware of the loop, the emotional loop that was there, the thought, emotion, sensation that led to the behavior and reinforce the whole loop because it goes circular after that. And it's oftentimes unconscious, now becomes choice. Now we're sitting in that space between stimulus and response where there's a choice. We can affect how we think, we can affect how we feel, and we can affect what we do. So your tiny shift today around this is just to name one loop today. That's it. Call it the control loop. Call it the worry loop. Call it the I can't stand my partner loop, or my kid loop, or my parent loop. And so that naming is the handle you get on it that allows you to move it. Okay, now let's get to insight number 8. So again, if you're on YouTube, you're seeing this right now, but if you're not, I'm opening up a JAMA article that speaks to the association between life purpose and mortality among US adults older than 50 years. So again, this was a study that was done, and the question they posed was, does an association exist between life purpose and all-cause or cause-specific mortality among people older than 50 years participating in the U.S. Health and Retirement Study? And the findings were almost 7,000 adults that took part in this. And what they found was, yes, it has a huge life purpose is a modifiable risk factor. And as such, the role of interventions to improve life purpose should be evaluated for health outcomes, including mortality. And what they found was that, I'll just read you the results here, of the almost 7,000 individuals included in the analysis, I talk about how many were men and women. There was almost half and half. Life purpose was significantly associated with all-cause mortality, and some significant cause-specific mortality associations with life purpose were also observed: heart, circulatory, blood conditions. So what we're seeing here is, like, again, one of the hidden truths of the impact of emotional health is it has an absolute impact on our health span, on how well we live into our years, and also our longevity. It's biological, it's physiological. This is not a soft science at all. It's so important to understand this. And this is another study that we see around relationships, to harken back to what we were talking about earlier, was Robert Waldinger's study, where he showed that people who felt the closest in their relationships actually lived longer. And we know research by the other studies by Ellen Langer shows that, when people are connected to plants and feel a sense of purpose in having the plants survived in nursing homes, they had more longevity in their life. So this is real, and we need to spread the news here, because people are so focused and over-focused on being stressed out around their exercise, nutrition, and sleep, which are all critical, but they treat emotional health like it's a soft science or it's secondary. And this is an absolute part of our health and longevity, and needs to be treated as such. And that's what my book, Tiny Shifts, is really all about. Again, I mentioned earlier that I'm putting on a special kind of Kickstarter pre-sale that's going on right now. It's a private pre-sale, link in the description if you want to get a signed copy from me. Also access to experiences that will help you go deeper into this work and make it come alive for you. And also, we find that with purpose, when we have a sense of meaning and purpose, we see associations with lower cortisol, literally also opening the blood vessels and the heart that's there. And so something you can do today that's just very simple to activate this is you can ask once today what you're doing. Hey, why does this matter? Not as a rhetorical thing, but really, like, I can ask myself now, why does this matter that I'm doing this podcast? And I'm hoping that this gets through to one person and has a positive influence that creates a tiny shift, maybe with repetition, and that makes a change in your life. Or these are all drops. Every episode is a drop that supports positive shifts in your life, and that impacts your health and has ripple effects across the people that you care about. So whatever answer comes to you there, let that guide your nervous system back to that direction. You could also be scrolling mindlessly and ask yourself that same question. Why does this matter? And you might find like this doesn't really matter. And you stop doing that. And that's also okay. Okay. Insight number 9 is about how self-worth precedes self-care. And this is a really important one. It's personal to my life. It also kicks off part 3 of my book. And when you think about it, it just makes sense. So what you're looking at here is a study that, and for those of you who, again, are listening on Apple or Spotify or whatever other podcast platform, I'll read this to you. For those of you on YouTube, you're seeing this live, or not live, recorded, but okay. So it says an association between self-worth and health promotion behaviors among older adults living in the community. And what it showed was, it's interesting, it showed that self-worth showed a modest correlation with health behaviors, meaning that those who had health behaviors seemed to have strong self-worth, and those who had strong self-worth seemed to engage in more in healthier behaviors. And so I think that's interesting, because to me in my life, it just makes it, if you feel like you're worth it and your life is worth it, you're going to have a little extra energy and motivation to do things to take care of yourself, to move better in your life, to exercise if that's important to you, to eat better if that's important to you, to work on sleeping better if that's important to you, to doing anything that is important to you because you feel like your life is worth it and that you matter. And so to me, that makes sense. And then it also makes sense that it reverses. When you do these things, it sends the message internally that you matter, that your time matters, that your attention matters, that if you're investing in relationships, that your relationship matters, that you matter in your relationships. And so it's a bit of a cycle there. So if we want to, the easiest place to start is just by working on our own self-worth. And one way of doing that is, if we're struggling, is engaging on our own self-compassion, which is just recognizing that we're struggling, that we're not the only human on the planet to be struggling. And I'm going to incline to support myself. Maybe that's taking a walk. Maybe that's just inserting the question, what do I need right now? And that might just be the tiny shift. That's one of the most powerful tiny shifts. And in my book, Tiny Shifts, I say, if there's one question you want to tattoo on your brain, it's this. Once you get through and you create a space enough in your awareness, you can drop the question in, what do I need right now? When you ask your brain questions, it searches for answers. That's accessing our natural intelligence. And then you can start building your self-worth, which will have ripple effects on the behaviors that you take. And your behaviors that you do will also reinforce your own self-worth. You can, so again, the tiny shift you can just make for yourself today is to ask yourself the question, what do I need? What would be supportive to me right now? Simple. Instead of ruminating and worrying, or you can recognize that when that's happening, that's the emotional loop. And then you can settle into lowering your shoulders, just give yourself a little space to breathe for a moment, and then drop in that new question. Another study that I thought was interesting along these lines was one that was published that said, is high self-esteem beneficial? And what they came to in their study was seeing that absolutely, I know there's different definitions between self-esteem and self-worth, but the conclusions in looking at several large meta-analyses of hundreds of individual studies found that that absolutely having a strong sense of self had a lot of benefits in a variety of areas, and including, here's to quote, including having more satisfying relationships, performing better at school and work, enjoying improved mental and physical health, and refraining from antisocial behavior. And then they continued to experience more of that across different stages of life. So again, gave you the tiny shift to kind of play with today. So the final insight that I wanted to give you, insight number 10 here, is that presence multiplies time. A lot of times we experience this feeling that time is going by so fast. Where did it all go? I hear all the time. I remember when my wife was pregnant with our first son many, many moons ago. And everyone from all walk of life, different socioeconomic backgrounds, all walks of life, always said, really appreciated the time goes by so fast. So one thing that we've found, or that research has found, and I'll show you a study here from Science Direct, is that the effects of mindfulness meditation have on time perception, how we can actually experience time slowing down a little bit when we become more present. And I have my own theories about this, but what we see is that when we're able to come to the moment and be able to name it and just be here with what's here, our perception of time actually slows down. Time may not slow down, but our perception of time slows down, and that's what matters. The same idea that we might have the same pain signals in our body, but if our perception of pain is lower, our experience of pain is lower. So if our perception of time slows down, when we allow ourselves to become more present in our lives, then our experience is life slowing down. And these studies show that. And that's emotional longevity, really. We're not only just adding years to our, adding years to our life, but also adding life to our years, the life that we're already living. And so one tiny shift that we can do here to just employ this, because I know long meditation practices are not for everyone, even though it is a conditioning if you're into that and that's supportive for you, but you can just feel one breath a few times a day, all the way in and all the way out. All the way in and all the way out. And that's you lengthening your life in real time. And so, these are some things to begin to play with. The takeaway here is that when you strengthen emotional health, the body gets in the mood for repair and healing. And that's the foundation of tiny shifts. These are small science-backed steps that really change everything moving forward. And as a reminder, the pre-sale is live this week. This is a movement I'm kicking off. Every pre-order helps bring this message to the people that also really need it. You can get a signed copy. You can get access to deeper experiences like a 21-day program and a 6-week program I'm putting on to help you more deeply integrate this into your life and bring a community around it. Thank you for being part of this movement, for believing that emotional health is longevity. My name is Dr. Elisha Goldstein. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Emotional Longevity Podcast. I hope you found it as inspiring and thought-provoking as I did. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit like down below, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone you know who could benefit from these insights. Your support helps us grow this incredible community and reach more people who need it. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to truly integrate these ideas into your life, I'd love to invite you to join me in a beautiful, supportive community that's doing this transformative work together. It's a space where you'll find guidance, connection, and the tools you need to create lasting emotional health and resilience. Check out the links in the description below to learn more. And before you go, make sure to tune into our next episode. It's one that you won't want to miss. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, emotional health isn't about just feeling good. It's about building the foundation for a longer, healthier, and more joyful life. I'll see you soon.